Hello everyone, Schmidt here and welcome back to another video. And as you probably would have seen from that little teaser video I put out a couple days ago, today we're going to be talking about how I built my treehouse and do a bit of a time lapse and then also a bit of commentary on my thought process and how it all worked trying to build in the trees. So let's get right to it. Now the first step that I like to usually do is to level out the area and to kind of create a blank canvas, if you will, for somewhere that I can build. At this point, while leveling this out, I hadn't actually decided I was going to build a treehouse quite yet. I just knew that this was a prime location as it is near a swamp, a black forest, and mountain biome, but it's in the meadows, so I'm safe. So that's why I chose this area. So once I leveled the area out and tried to plan out the platform that I was going to be built on, that's where the idea of a treehouse started to come together. As you can see here, while on stream, I was talking to chat about how we could plant some trees possibly and build a house that was suspended on top of trees. At one point, I also thought about building a circular home, and you'll see that comes into play later. Before I actually started building the treehouse itself, I was a little bit concerned about possibly being raided by trolls or grey dwarfs or whatever else. And so what I decided to do was just go ahead and dig a moat around the build area first, just to give us a bit of defenses. Now a lot of people often ask me when they see the treehouse, well, won't it just get destroyed once one of the trees gets destroyed by, let's say, a troll swinging its club? And that is a concern of mine, so that's why I dug a moat going around, because this moat, if it's 1 square wide, it's large enough that it requires the trolls to actually find a new path around, and therefore they don't actually start swinging at the trees, because all they're doing is trying to find a way around. That's the inherent safety of having a moat around your base, is that it causes the mobs to disrupt their path, and causes them to have to find a new path, all the while you can just snipe them down using arrows. Or they just get stuck in the moat themselves, and then there's not much else they can do. Actually, in fact, while we were building this base, there was one point where we were raided by 2 trolls. Luckily, the moat was already there, so one of the trolls got stuck inside, and another troll just spent most of their time walking around the base trying to find a way in. Once we got the general structure down, it was time to do a bit more planning. And here you can see me talking to chat and planning out together as a community where we were going to put the trees, where we were going to put the base, and what kind of base we were going to have. At first I planned to just have 4 trees surrounding the base and then building a base in the center, suspended above, using the trees as foundation with a little ladder going down the middle. Once we had an idea of how we wanted the treehouse to look, it was time to plant the trees. This was my first time planting trees, so at that point I thought you had to cultivate the ground and then place the saplings. However, I realized afterwards you don't actually need to cultivate the ground at all. You can place saplings pretty much on any dirt. And I used pine trees because I knew that pine trees, they had a long trunk before any leaves actually grew on them. The leaves were only at the top of the tree. So I knew this would actually free up some space for me to build the base without being covered by trees and not being able to see anything inside. So once the pine trees had grown to full length, which for reference takes about 2.5 days to grow, it was time to do some testing. So you can see here, I'm building ladder up and then building pieces onto a tree. Now for those of you who don't know, when you build pieces that are clipped or attached to trees, they become foundational pieces. It's as if the tree is part of the terrain, and so therefore anything you build up against the terrain is considered a foundational piece. So see here, I was just testing my height limits here and building as high as I could, trying to figure out what worked and what didn't, and then that would be basically the basis of our design for the treehouse. After having done some testing on a singular tree trunk, I then had to think about how many more trees I needed to build. The only foundational pieces I would have when I was suspended in the air was the trees themselves. So at this point I realized I probably needed more trees, but the key was where do we put the trees without crowding it or making sure that we had enough suspension for the base. In the end, it was decided that we would just plant a tree in the center as a central structure, as well as trees going in between the current 4 corners to provide maximum support. This way, our tiles would never be more than 2 or 3 spaces away from any nearby tree. And so while we were waiting for the final few trees to grow, it was time to think about what kind of treehouse we wanted. Now my initial thought was just to create a center rectangular structure that would span across all the trees. However, after some discussion with chat, and also kind of thinking about how to make it aesthetically pleasing, we ended up deciding to have circular structure and making multiple towers dotted around the trees, kind of similar to the Wookiee homeland of Kashyyyk or the Ewok structures from Star Wars. And finally, once we decided on the style of treehouse that we wanted, now it was time to start building. First up, we decided to try and build a tower on one of the trees in the corners to start getting an idea of how it was going to work and how we're going to have to go about building this whole treehouse. So that's pretty much for this video, guys. This is just part 1 of the entire build process. In part 2, you'll get to see how we finalized a design for the type of towers that we wanted on the treehouse, as well as expanding on the central column and the other towers as well. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Stay tuned for part 2, and I'll see you guys next time.